Welcome back to some more Umineko when they cry. So, where we last left off, you know, there was, something interesting happened with we're still going through the past during World War II on Rokkenjima, to where Kinzo was tasked to be the translator considering that the Italians traveled all the way to the island by a shitty submarine due to bad luck, and they couldn't get access to anyone that can speak English, except for the the fellow maiden, in which Kinzo. This is where Kinzo's interest sparked up a flare, in which it is Beatrice Castiglione. And I was going to point out that that last name sounded pretty Italian, but I just decided not to. But if anything, it seems like these two, both Kinzo and Beatrice, are getting along well, the sort. Although the most important serious situation there is what or was that they were able to get. Apparently, the submarine was heavily weighed by huge amount of gold ingots, or in other words, a lot of gold bars. Although I guess if anything, in terms between the two alliances, I guess a lot of gold, it really comes to like a little sense of greed, that sort of thing. Because the Italians wanted to request the Japanese to hide the gold for them, but in some sort during the negotiation, the Japanese say would agree in one condition. They wanted to take, take a certain percentage, in which that sparked a fire, and I get a bad feeling it's not going to go so well. I guess when it comes to it is similar to the family inheritance during the at the Ushiromiya family conference. Although it wouldn't be surprising that violence would occur as well. But I get that sort of feeling that would happen. It would happen later. If it's going to happen in World War II, it's going to happen. I mean, if it's going to happen during the family conference, then it's going to happen in fucking World War II. So, but if it's a shitload of fucking money, then why couldn't they split 50-50? Why is it that 60-40 or 30-70, yada yada? But guess not everything can be balanced in a way. Anyway, let's continue. The Italians were gathered in a cramped room, arguing fiercely.
反対です。死んだ戦友たちのためにも断固軍人魂を貫くべきです。貫くとはどういうことか。この島に黄金を隠せということか。東洋人たちの申し出を受けるということか。
By accepting the proposal of those Asians. Yeah, I thought the Japanese and Italians get along with each other, but I guess during this time of on Rokkenjima, I guess there are some sorts of racism.
東洋人たちは信用できません。特にあの山本という男。断じて油断できません。黄金を荷上げして日本人たちに見られたのはやはり失敗でした。艦と共に沈めるべきでした。日本人の基地で沈めてどうする。やがていつかは引き上げられる。
I'm considering how heavy gold is. I wonder how they're. I mean, I don't think they have the technology to yank it back up from the deep water. But
隠したことにはならない。いずれにせよ、この島から黄金を誰にも知られずに運び出す方法はない。 洋上で名誉ある自鎮を選んでいたらこんなことには。
Oh, too late now, I suppose. But it's like, I always wonder to myself, I was like, where the fuck did they get the gold? It's not like the Nazi Germany were rich, or maybe, or they.
艦のダメージが致命的だったことがあの時点で分かっていたら。どうしてあの時少佐は日本軍に救援要請を。
Although, hypothetically, in a anti-Semitic sense, like, I guess the Nazi Germany was able to get all them. I could, make a theory that the gold where they got was from the Nazi. Maybe there was some, behind the scenes with the Nazi Germany where they were able to get all. I think this was all the gold, like during the Holocaust. Although it would be fucked up a theory, I would say, but I already said it out anyway. So, hello.
日本軍にこの黄金のことを知られたら少佐はどう任務を遂行するつもりだったんだ。
少佐が救援要請を出した時点で我々の任務はもう失敗していたんだ。諸君にも祖国で待つ家族がいるはずだ。そして極東の島国までよく航海に耐えた。それに対するこれは正当な報酬なのだという考え方もある。
あの時日本人に助けなど求めていなかった。
死んだ戦友たちが浮かばれない。こんな目に。
少尉、日本人が友好的でない場合、我々は最終的解決手段を辞さない覚悟が必要です。
伍長、最終的解決手段とは何か。
Also, that's what confused me. Like, if this is the Italians conversing with each other, then what is this like? And they're saying in Japanese. I was okay. Well, I'm not gonna even question it. Someone gulped. A stiff tension hung over the room.
日本人たちはたるみ切っています。実戦経験もない腰抜けばかりです。我々は精兵です。すでに基地内の間取りのほぼ全てと日本人の人数、配置状況は把握しています。少尉の命令があれば短時間で制圧できるでしょう。
Oh fuck! I knew it.
戦闘員と思わしきは山本を含めて数人程度。残りは軍属の作業員風情です。上辺の人数は日本人が上ですが、実質兵力ではこちらが優位です。
日本人を殺せば迎えの船が来た時それをどう説明する。ごまかしようがないぞ。
死体さえ見つからなければどうとでもごまかせます。少尉、この基地を制圧するのは容易です。山本以下主要な兵士数人を殺してみせればあっさりと作業員たちは降伏するでしょう。彼らに黄金を運ばせ地中に埋めましょう。もちろん彼らの口は永遠に塞ぎますが。
日本人たちを皆殺しにするということか。
殺しましょう。全員殺せば黄金のことは誰にも知られずに済むのです。
At that moment, the supposedly locked door opened slightly and a metal object was thrown in.
グラナダ
Hmm. I see that the Japanese overheard what they're saying. I don't see. That's the thing about war is like, if why couldn't they kill off like the ones that are like that deem a threat, and the rest are just if they're not threatening, I guess the non-threatening are can be a threat if they like spill out the info to others. As the yell rang out, the table was kicked over to be used as a shield, and they all dropped to the floor. However, in this cramped room, it probably wouldn't do them any good. The Italians were all prepared for death. Fortunately, the shoddy grenade was a dud. The door was slammed open, and the three Japanese soldiers wielding pistols jumped in.
クソったれ不発だイタリア人ども殺せ殺せ殺せ応戦しろ各自自由発砲
In this small room, no matter who shot where, it was bound to hit someone. The exchange of bullets instantly caused a rain of blood, with casualties on both sides. The three who had jumped in were covered with bullet holes and fell over, moaning and thrashing.
Gino! Gino! くそ肺をやられてる助からない幸運な犠牲だあの手榴弾が不発でなかったら全員死んでる
The grenade was still rolling about on the floor. It had been a surprise attack. Lieutenant Yamamoto had probably judged that the negotiations wouldn't go his way and had decided to make the first move. Or maybe he'd been planning from the beginning to put them in a position where they'd be gathered in one place to discuss his offer. Rokkenjima was their island. That's the weird thing. How did the Italian soldiers that are like having the conversation in a room saying like, "Oh, I know the layout of the map," but the island is hidden. But the thing is, like, the Japanese that are on that station on Rokkenjima know about the area, so it's obviously they can overhear what they say. We're just weird. Maybe they had some cameras. Maybe there were like some sort of like a wiretap involved. If they killed all the Italians, then not half, but all of the gold would go to the Japanese. There was a chance the grenade might go off late. The Italians rushed out into the corridor. They heard gunfire from down the hallway. It was coming from the direction of the submarine dock. Clearly, the troops guarding the pile of gold were being attacked.
少尉ご命令をやむを得ん日本人は殺せ注意あいつらできますこの連中ただの船乗りじゃね
えなるほど黄金の番人を任されるだけの兵士ということか人数はこちらが上だ焦らず囲んで殺せイタリア人狩りだ
As soon as I heard the sound of repeated gunfire, I knew that something, which had been smoldering since the time the gold was unloaded, had finally burst. The eyes of our soldiers looking at that gold hadn't been normal. Yes, those eyes had been entranced by demons. The Italians had been pushed to the limits by the heavy burden they bore. Who wouldn't have snapped after being trapped in the distant land where you couldn't understand? Who wouldn't have snapped after being trapped in the distant land where you can't understand the language or the writing? Thinking I had to do something, I ran towards the sound of gunfire. Looking back on it, that was an extremely stupid thing to do. Is Kinzo gonna find and search for Castiglione? That sound meant that there were people shooting at each other, people killing each other, and yet, unarmed as I was, I dashed towards the sound as though I was trying to mediate some schoolyard fight. It didn't take long before I learned how foolish and naive that was in the heat of battle.
Hiraoka Heizo!
Warrant Officer Hiraoka was lying face down, his entire body drenched in blood. Judging by the trail of blood behind him, it was clear that he had somehow managed to crawl here from a different room before dying. No, he was still twitching. He might not be dead yet, but on this island without a doctor, no. Even if we had a doctor, who could possibly save a man who had been shot this many times in the chest. When I looked into the room he must have crawled out of, I saw 2 more blood-stained Japanese corpses. I fell backwards pathetically on my butt, my mouth hanging open in shock. Come to think of it, that was the first time I had ever faced death in my life. The entire world was at war. Even though millions were dying both east and west, this was the first time I met with a person's death directly. Ridiculous. Didn't I join the army, hoping to die? Didn't I whine about not being sent to the front lines? Well, yeah, so rejoice, Kinzo. Isn't this the death you were looking for? That's the weird part. So, Kinzo wanted to die by being in the military, but the thing is like, but whenever he sees like the soldiers being shot to death, this is not the death that he was looking for. But the thing is, like, what is the death? Maybe Kinzo, you know, wanted to like die in an accident, or like, you know, he wanted to die in a painless execution. Why not spread your hands and yell out loud? Come for me, magnificent death. Someone came running towards me. It was a colleague of mine, a Japanese man, Tajima-kun. He dashed towards me, pale-faced and out of breath. His face seemed horribly contorted with terror. Mine probably looked the same.
Tajima-kun, 何があったんだ?
Someone yelled in Italian, and at the same time, Tajima-kun let out a scream. Then, he grabbed onto me as he fell to the floor. A red stain was spreading across his back before my eyes.
Tajima!
As he spat bubbles of blood, he said that one word and died. But the shock of seeing someone die right in front of me did not freeze my heart. At a fundamental level, all living things are unconcerned with the deaths of others. The one thing that matters is whether they themselves die or not. It was the barrel of the gun the Italian soldier was pointing that froze my heart. Tajima-kun's back burst once more as he leaned against me. Flesh tore, blood splattered. The warm splash of it covered my face. Was the Italian still trying to finish him off, even though he had stopped moving for good? How foolish I'd been. Can I still not understand the scene in front of me? Rejoice, Kinzo. Now you'll finally get what you've wanted all this time. The Italian hadn't fired to finish off Tajima-kun. He had been aiming at the man Tajima-kun had fallen on. Me, Ushiromiya Kinzo. I pushed his corpse aside, scrabbled against the floor, and dashed away, tumbling over myself. My hands had pushed off against the floor hard enough to tear off the fingernail on my left hand. When faced with death, humans truly can resist with all they've got. I tumbled over and over as I ran, scrapping up parts of my body. It was painful, hot, but that didn't matter at all. I heard the yelling in Italian come from behind me over and over again. It felt like they were running, chasing after me. I didn't want to look back, so I kept on running and running as though the Italians were right behind me. This is death. Didn't you want to die? No, I don't want to die. Why? Didn't I want to die so badly? But now I know. I know how wonderful it is to be alive. She taught me. Biche did. I can only be free when I talk with her. No, by talking with her, I finally came alive for the first time. I was born. I want to... Oh. Because Kinzo having interest in Biche, the conversation with her gave him, you know, the will. It gave him the morale, you know, the will to live. I want to live. I want to live, I want to live, I want to live. I don't want to die. I want to live and see her right now. If I don't see her, I'll die. I'll be killed. Stay cool, Kinzo. She might be killed too. If you live and she dies, you might as well be dead. Before I knew it, my face was covered in tears, snot, and saliva. When I stumbled into something and fell, I was finally able to come to my senses a little. I could still hear intermittent gunfire, or however you pronounce it. The gunfight was still going on, and it had spread throughout the entire base. Biche, are you okay? I'll find her and take her to a safe place. The lieutenant will probably kill all the Italians to steal the gold. Biche probably won't be in an exception.
Biche. Biche!
No, I'm pretty sure Lieutenant Yamamoto doesn't give a shit about Biche because considering he's part of the victim within the Italians. I lived for the first time after meeting you. I was born, so if you die, I'll die again. I could feel every cell in my body being reborn, not as Ushiromiya Kinzo, but as a completely different Kinzo. Of course, I was terrified that I might really be shot if I went back, but I didn't want to die anymore, to truly die. So, I was able to overcome my fear.
Bloodbath! 一体何が起こってるの？この騒ぎは何？
君は知らなくていい。そこにじっと隠れていろ。同胞が呼びかけるまで出てくるんじゃない。イタリア人の声が聞こえた。そこにいるぞ。くそ、誰東洋人め。
Reuben stood with Beatrice behind his back and neatly shot the two men rushing at him with two 9mm bullets from his Beretta M1934. However, one of the 8mm bullets from their Type 94 semi-auto pistols went straight into Ruben's chest. All three of the shooters were struck in the chest and fell down in a heap.
しっかりしてルーベース。
地上へ逃げろ。森の中へ隠れ。
おやおや、賑やかではないか。
The next person to appear was the commanding officer of the Japanese soldiers, Yamamoto. The blast of 3 guns had just sounded. Adding on Beatrice's screams, it was hardly surprising that he had noticed the encounter.
こんなことなら最初からこの女を人質に取ればよかった。くそいまいましい連中だ。
Yamamoto spat. Beatrice used that moment to snatch up Ruben's gun.
躊躇なく銃を拾おうとするとは。イタリア女は実に物騒だ。くそ、二人がかりでしくじりやがって。
He spat this last part at the 2 dying men who lay moaning at his feet. However, what had happened to them wasn't particularly surprising. It wasn't the first time it had happened either. In this tiny, cramped tunnel, everyone had met head-on. When both sides shot recklessly in such a situation, the result was 2 corpses. So, whoever sensed another person and pulled the trigger quickest won, quote-unquote. That was the only way to survive this battle without a bullet in your chest. Because of this, both Japanese and Italians had killed each other without hesitation, and they sometimes even pulled the trigger on oncoming allies. In the midst of all this were several Japanese men who had stumbled into the fight, wondering what was going on. It didn't matter whether the other person was holding a gun or not. Everyone had reflexively pulled the trigger at the sight of anyone other than themselves, trying to stay alive. The entire base had been wrapped up in this slaughter. There was a fierce gun battle taking place on the submarine dock, and a massacre resembling a hunt was taking place inside the base. Most of the non-combatants assigned to this base were killed before they knew what was going on. The Italians were indeed quite seasoned troops, but their numbers began to drop bit by bit. Blood-stained corpses were scattered everywhere. At first, it had probably been a proper gunfight. However, as their minds began to grow wary and numb, it devolved into that most basic cause of wars throughout humanity, the desire to kill all foreigners you don't understand. Whenever they heard words they didn't understand, they pulled the trigger. By that point, the screams of foreigners sounded no different from those of man-shaped beasts. After all, they couldn't understand pleading in another language. So, it had long ago turned into a mere massacre. As the number of dead surpassed the number of living, silence began to return to the base. Just when it felt as though everyone had died, and you could hear the desolate sound of the wind blowing through the caves, there would be a sudden scream, the crisp sound of a gun, and you'd remember that the massacre wasn't yet over. This happened over and over again, and eventually, Rue's silence fell. It marked the pitiful end for those led astray by gold. The leader of the Italian soldiers, Angelo, had managed to survive somehow. He encountered nothing but the corpses of friend and foe. All was quiet once more in the base. If he was careless enough to call out, he might be shot from the shadows somewhere. So, he snuck about like a panther, breathing quietly and searching for remaining enemies. What did happen to Beatrice? Uh, or actually, Biche is might as well be the Biche in Beatrice during the World War II era. But she, I feel like she might be killed off by Lieutenant Yamamoto, despite because he's a piece of shit. But who knows? Maybe Kinzo was able to save her before anything bad happened. Snuck about like a panther, breathing quietly and searching for remaining enemies. There was no sign or trace of any living person. Maybe all of the people in this base had died.
日本人めおのれ
The Japanese struck first, but at that time, we were also talking about killing them. They simply made the first move as military men. So perhaps we should be grateful for this day. Even if the boat had come to pick us up, there would have been no honor left for us. We would have been mere failures in our mission, unfit to face our dead comrades. Perhaps dying here in the Far East alongside my gun is a more fitting end for a soldier. I noticed the sound of shuffling feet coming from around the corner and strained to hear. Is someone seriously wounded and dragging their feet? Noticing them before they notice me greatly helps my chances. At this stage, there's no point in taking prisoners. We must dispose of all the Japanese. I'll dash around the corner, quickly check to see who they are, and shoot if it's a Japanese person. Nothing more. I've been hiding my footsteps the whole time. They probably don't know I'm here. Once the shuffling footsteps had come close enough, Angelo leaned around the corner and raised its gun. The voice that reached him spoke Italian.
逃げて
貴様貴様を探していたぞアンジェロ少尉これで全員だな俺はしっかり貴様らの死体を数えて回ってたんだからな
I see.
しっかりして
It seems Yamamoto took her hostage.
アンジェロ少尉
Blood poured from Angelo's chest. His gun fell to the floor, then his knees, and then the rest of his body crumpled and stopped moving. Yamamoto's accuracy with the gun wasn't particularly stellar. However, Angelo had waited until they were fairly close before jumping out, so Yamamoto had made the shot. He had managed to hit, even with a short-barreled handgun in one hand, and a woman as a hostage in the other.
それにしても我が六軒島守備隊の情けないことよまさか私以外は全員死んだのではあるまいなやれやれクズども
女を盾に取らなきゃ戦えない人手だし離して
静かにしろイタリア女は実に騒がしいおとなしくしてれば命までは取らんという
It was such an obvious lie that even he wore a bitter smile. The Italians were spies working for the enemy, and they all died along with the garrison in a gunfight. Since this was the story Yamamoto wanted to tell, he couldn't afford to have any Italian survivors. By this point, he wouldn't be able to keep the entire pile of gold, but he should be able to grab as many as he could carry. Even that would be worth a huge amount of money. Beatrice suddenly swung her head, smashing Yamamoto's nose hard.
誰か助けて誰か
She almost managed to escape. However, Yamamoto quickly grabbed her leg and tripped her. She fell onto her back, and Yamamoto mercilessly stomped his foot down on her stomach and pointed his gun at her.
じゃじゃ馬を飼いならす趣味はないのでな。貴様は死ねえ。注意、彼女は無関係だ。話してやれ。
Kinzo had jumped out from the shadows. He was holding a gun he had stolen from one of the corpses.
後ろ宮か。おう、生きておったか。彼女を離せ。苦しがって。貴様であろう。イタリア人どもに攻撃があることを密告したの。何の話だ。
Yamamoto didn't know that the grenade had been a dud. He had been sure that the surprise attack would work, but it hadn't. So he'd assumed that Kinzo must have tipped them off.
貴様のせいで奇襲が失敗してこのざまだ。この裏切り者め。貴様がこのイタリア女を通じて内通していたことはお見通しよ。あなたが黄金に目がくらんだからこの事態を招いたのではないのか。
I don't think Kinzo would be that much of an asshole, considering to, you know, I guess he was scared to know that, you know, the Japanese would be blinded by gold, and so he would try to like soften up to Biche. Or, you know, he already knew that the Japanese were a piece of shit. So, there's that. And they were already blinded by gold to begin with. But they struck first, though.
逃げて金蔵。この男は命乞いしてる人も撃ったわ。あなたも撃たれる。
喋るな、イタリア女。もう一度口を聞いたら容赦なく撃つぞ。
Yamamoto ground his heel into Beatrice's gut.
よせ、やめろ。彼女は何の関係もない。ああ？銃を上官に向けるとはどういうつもりか。頭を冷やせよ、愚か者め。私とお前で口裏を合わせればあの黄金の山は私たちだけのものではないか。私一人では少々をくすねるくらいしかできんが、お前と二人でならもっと多くの数をくすねることができる。上官面をするつもりはないぞ。男同士二人できっちり山分けしようじゃないか。五分五分に分けようと言ってあなたは彼らの寝首をかこうとしたのではないのか。後ろ見、どうやら貴様は黄金より鉛の方がお好みらしいな。
No. It's more like, what's the point of having all the gold to yourselves when you're not going to do anything with it? Without any hesitation, Yamamoto raised the barrel of his gun towards Kinzo and pulled the trigger. It grazed Kinzo's right ear. If Yamamoto's aim had been just a bit better, the bullet would have slammed into Kinzo's face.
金蔵。よくも。
貴様、
Not letting Yamamoto's momentary distraction go to waste, Beatrice lashed out and planted her right foot in Yamamoto's crotch. After moaning in pain, a demonic expression flashed across Yamamoto's face and he stomped on her chest.
見て。こんな 死ね
Beatrice shut her eyes tightly, hoping that she could withstand the coming pain. No one wants to watch the moment they get shot. You know, it took, well, good riddance to that guy, but, you know, this would have handled, you know, when I looked at this, I've seen this some sort of scene so many times, like, what's taking Kinso so long? Like, the bullet grazed his, if the bullet grazed his ears, he could have just shot, Kinzo has the, look, Kinzo is young enough, with a sharp mind to just, and he has the gun. He could have just shot back, could have just take the aim and shot right back before BJ could have got any more injuries. Like she kicked the old man in the balls. Kinzo had a certain amount of time to aim with the gun and shoot him, just like that. Like, even a headshot isn't this fucking hard. I'm not doing this by a shooting game logic, but this is what the situation would have been, hypothetically. A blood splash poured out of Yamamoto's chest.
あんたがあんたの都合で大勢の命を奪ったように私も私の都合であんたの命を奪う
Could Yamamoto hear Kinzo's words until the end? In his last moments, he seemed to grin. Then slowly, he fell backwards with a spurt of blood.
Kinzo! 無事なの？てっきりあなたが撃たれたと。
Beatrice tried to stand up, but then doubled over and started coughing.
ビーチェ怪我をしたのか
あばらが痛むわ。その人でなしが激しく踏んだものだから。
大丈夫か折れていなければいいんだが
これくらいで折れるほどイタリア女はやわじゃないの。でもありがとう。あなたは命の恩人だわ。あなたが来なければ私はきっとそこに転がっていたわ。
Well, as you know what they say, when they see a shitload of money, greed turned them into the fucking devil they are. Yamamoto had shown no mercy. Her ribs were probably cracked. We didn't have the option of waiting, possibly for several days for the ship that was coming. I made the decision to carry her away from the island. The man who kept yelling about preserving the secrecy of the base is lying there dead. Yeah, like the bottom-feeding barrel he is. The next island over, Nijima, is close. A small boat should be more than enough to get us there.
君を病院へ運ばなければならない君が思っているより傷が深かったらいけない
知らなかった。この島には病院もあるのね。
ない隣の島へ船で運ぶ君は病院へ私はこの島での出来事をうまく片付けないととばっちりで軍法会議者だ
Okay, by that logic, You're just a soldier working for the station at the fucking island. Yeah, nothing to do with it.
頼みがあるの。私を病院へ連れて行かないで。
どうして？
病院へ行って大使館に連絡が行けば、私はやがて本国へ送還されるわ。そしてきっとあれこれと尋問を受けるんだわ。私はママを見殺しにした奴らを自分の祖国とは認めないの。もう私の帰るべき祖国はないの。ここが私の終点だから、もう私はどこへも行きたくないの。私に優しくしてくれたアンジェロ少尉もルーベンスもみんな死んでしまった。
だから君までここで死ぬと？イタリア女はヤワじゃないんだろ？生きるんだ。
ねえ金蔵、生きるってどういう意味？あなたが教えてくれたはずよ。生きるってのはただ息をすることじゃないわ。私はイタリアへ帰りたくないの。
ビーチェ。
あなたは私と出会うまで死んでいたと言ってくれたわ。でもそれは私も同じなの。潜水艦の中で私は死んでいた。
What does that mean that you were dead until he met? Does that mean like you back? This is beforehand that you two were within nihilism? I always thought that would be the right definition.
祖国も滅び、ママも死んだ。
Or in in internet terms, doomerism.
パパもね。私はこんな船沈んでしまえと願ったわ。だからここにたどり着いた時、実は死に損ねたとがっかりした。その矢先よ、少尉が英語がわかる者はいるかと騒ぎ出したのは。
When Kinzo met Beatrice, he finally forgot about dying. And when Beatrice met Kinzo, she also forgot about dying.
私は
Now that I've lost my homeland, my family, and my friends,
祖国も家族も友人たちも失った私をあなたにさらってほしいと願うの。
ピーチェ。
でもそれは叶えられない望みだとも分かってる。ならばせめて迎えの船が来るまでの数日間をあなたと一緒にいたいの。胸の痛みなんて気にしない。だって迎えの船に連れ去られたら私はもう死んでしまうのだから。
Beatrice spoke this, smiling softly. She did her best to hide the pain in her chest.
お願い金蔵、迎えが来るまでの数日間でいいから私をさらって。
その願いは叶えられない。
Looking apologetic, Kinzo lifted Beato up and gently sat her in the boat.
育児なし。やっぱり日本の男は軟弱だわ。
That's funny.
そうだな。私は育児なしだ。だから君の願いは片方しか叶えられない。
With a clunk, he placed it, quote unquote, wrapped in the jacket in the boat.
片方とは？
迎えが来るまでの数日間でいいから。の方は叶えられないということさ。
The half of the wish will be granted, however, the other half, until the boat comes for you, that I refuse. I disagree.
どういう意味？
君をさらう。そっちを叶えることにした。
金蔵。
There has to be a doctor in Nijima. I'm wearing a Navy uniform. I should be able to pass myself off as a survivor of a boat carrying a VIP that was sunk by enemy ships. If the doctor happens to be of the greedy sort, all the better. After all, I have right here the golden magic to make people do what I say. Well, it has been 52 minutes in. So what have we learned from this part? They say when there's two opposing groups when it comes to negotiations of vast amounts of wealth, it turns them the devil they are within both sides. And, you know, really hard to tend to generalize, you know, whether the rich is bad for the sake of it. Can't really judge a book by its cover without, you know, any sort of like racial comments or, you know, acts of violence. But with that said, I think this is a good place to end it from here. So, next part, we will find out during the aftermath of the bloodshed that had occurred in Rokkenjima. So, both Kinzo and Miche are the survivors. And, well, who knows? Maybe there will be a happy ending later. Anyway, I will see you guys later. Have a good one.